Hello, America, and welcome to the Glenn Beck program. We're going to start a conversation today with a gentleman that I think that you really need to know. I want to say to you right on the outset that if there is anything that you can contribute money to, if you're into charity or even better, investment in our future, this man has that investment for you. He is going to explain to you how close we are to the edge of losing our democracy and our freedom, our true freedom, in a way that you won't even notice that your freedom is gone. And his specialty is talking about the algorithms and things that are happening now at Google, but Google is not alone. I want to introduce you. In fact, I want to read some things. Distinguished scientist. He is in the behavioral sciences. He is former editor-in-chief of Psychology Today. He is currently the senior research psychologist at the American Institute for Behavioral Research and Technology. He is a contributing editor for Scientific American Mind, founder and director emeritus of the Cambridge Center for Behavioral Sciences in Massachusetts, author of 15 books, PhD in psychology from Harvard University, and now a man without a country, in a way. Welcome. I am so glad that you are here. Dr. Robert Epstein. I say you're a man without a country because you are trying to find out the truth of what's happening with Google and how things are being manipulated. And you've had friends turn on you. For what reason?
And family members too, not just friends. So.
Family too now.
Sure.
For what reason?
Well, because I stumbled onto something, now it's almost 7 years ago, I stumbled onto the fact that if Google search results, and we've all seen them, we all see them every day, if Google search results favor one candidate over another, and that means if you click on a high search result and it takes you to a web page that makes that candidate look really good, if their search results favor one candidate, that can easily shift the opinions and voting preferences of undecided voters. You can shift 20% of them easily, and up to 80% of undecided voters can be shifted that way just because of the bias or the favoritism in Google search results. And so I made that discovery a while back, and that just was like opening Pandora's box, and I found technique after technique after technique that Google, and to a lesser extent other tech companies, have to change thinking and behavior without anyone knowing that they're doing it and without leaving a paper trail for authorities to trace.
I want to be really clear. You and I probably don't agree on who to vote for, in the last 20 years, maybe, perhaps. I don't know. We haven't talked about it. But you have voted for Hillary Clinton. You had a picture of the Clintons over your desk signed by them, or a letter, right? So you've always been a Democrat that has voted that direction.
I've been an independent leaning left, and I'm definitely very, very strong supporter of the Clintons, and I definitely supported Hillary in 2016, yes.
And Hillary is actually one of the reasons why you can't talk to people now, is because she put out a tweet about how you are a bogus scientist. What was that about specifically? What was she talking about there?
Well, first of all, my head is still reeling from this. I just can't really make sense of it. But it started, this was mid-August, it started with a tweet from President Trump referring...
Which are always fun.
Yeah, so this was fun.
Yeah.
It was referring to testimony I had given to Congress a few weeks before. And in that testimony, I said that in 2016, I measured substantial bias in Google search results that favored Hillary Clinton, and the bias was sufficient to have shifted to her over time somewhere between 2.6 and 10.4 million votes.
That's phenomenal.
Yeah.
And you can back that up.
Oh, absolutely. So I explained this. I told this to Congress. Trump tweeted about it. He didn't get the details right, which
It's a Donald Trump tweet.
Yeah, he didn't get the details right.
Right. And he made it sound worse. I mean, I think he said 15 million people that
16 million,
yeah,
whatever,
something like that.
And he didn't get it right. And he also said that I said that Google manipulated the election. I've never actually said that. I've reported what I found. I've measured the bias. I've done extensive studies now in 5 national elections in 4 countries, tens of thousands of people. I know what that bias does to undecided voters. I know how many votes you can shift, and I just reported what I found.
Okay, so let me just stop you here and just ask for clarification. What is the problem with the word manipulate?
Well, that implies intentionality, and I used to be obsessed with that issue, and then over time I realized, that's not really that important, because even if it's just their algorithm, if the algorithm is being neglected and the algorithm on its own is going to favor one candidate over another, and think about that. I mean, it will always favor one dog food over another, one music service over another. That's how it's programmed. It will always favor one candidate over another. Well, if that happens, then in a close election, that determines who wins the election.
And you said that was in 2016, but I've talked to you several times since. You found this again in 2018, did you not?
Yes, in 2018, again found substantial liberal bias in the Google search engine, but not Bing or Yahoo, and that was also true in 2016, and that's important. So we're finding it on one big search engine, the search engine, basically that controls most search around the world, and not finding that same bias on the other search engines. So that's key. And in 2018, I calculated that bias was sufficient to have shifted nationwide 78.2 million votes to Democrats. Now that's spread across hundreds of elections because it's a midterm. But still,
that's insane.
Sure.
What's coming in 2018 or 2020?
Well, 2020, I'm guessing that Google and some other companies are going to go all out, and we're going to see not just that kind of bias, but we're going to see probably about a dozen different techniques being used that can shift opinions and can shift votes without anyone knowing that it's occurring and without leaving a paper trail for authorities to trace.
So you can say, well, I'm not sure, I don't want to get into, maybe it's just the algorithm run amok. But after 2016, what's so concerning is, I know people in Silicon Valley, they live in this utopian world, and it's part of that makes them exciting, is they live in this world where they're like, we'd do anything. But they also feel a grave responsibility. And, right after the election, the co-founders stood up and said, we can't let this happen again. And we have seen it in their documents since, where they are talking about making sure this mistake of Donald Trump doesn't happen again. 70 million votes swayed stops this from being a free election.
Well, in the presidential election for 2020, I've calculated that if all the tech companies, the big ones, favor the same candidate, which is likely, they can shift about 15 million votes just in the presidential election. But if you think about it, that gives you an enormous possible win margin, in what might have been a close election.
Yeah, that's 15 million votes. That can become a landslide.
Well, that's because that's 10% of the probably of the likely number of people who will vote. So if you can shift 15 million votes, you can create a 20% win margin. So there's no contest if these companies actually use all of these techniques, and there are some crazy techniques out there now.
Like what?
Well, as I've discovered them, I've had to put names on them because these techniques have never existed before. They're made possible because of the internet and because of the emergence of monopolies that control certain
much.
kinds of certain kinds of experiences people have. One quick example: 2018. This is true. This actually happened. On Google's homepage, they replaced the word Google with the words "Go Vote" on Election Day. And people were thrilled. They said, what a great public service that is. How wonderful that Google would do that. They got rid of their own name and put in "Go Vote." And as soon as I saw that, I realized, wait a minute, this is not a public service. And I did exactly what their own data analysts would do. I sat down, I looked at the demographics of who would see that during the day, and that would be seen about 500 million times on Election Day by Americans, by the way. That's how frequently Google is used.
So I'm going to take a quick break, and then I want you to come back and tell me, why did that affect anything? How could that possibly affect anything? In a minute. So how did Google writing "no vote" or "go vote"? How did that change people's? How did it change the election?
Sure. Well, because it turns out, if you do the calculations exactly as Google's own data analysts would have done, they knew that far more Democrats would see that during the day than Republicans. And in fact, if Google showed that prompt to everyone in the country, that would have given that day at least 800,000 more votes to Democrats than to Republicans. Now, again, it's a midterm election, so that's spread across many races, but still. Now, if they sent that mainly to Democrats or only to Democrats, then that number goes way up.
So why? But how does that have any kind of ill effect on anything if they can't control who's seeing it? It's just who's going to Google that day.
Well, they can control, so in other words, they could show that prompt mainly to Democrats if they wanted to.
Did they do that?
Well, we don't know. So without having what I call monitoring systems in place to actually, look over people's shoulders and see what they're seeing, if you don't have those systems in place, you don't know who Google sent that to. But if they sent it to everybody, that still gave at least 800,000 more votes to Democrats than to Republicans.
And do you think they knew that?
I'm positive they knew that, and there's no way they wouldn't display a prompt like that if they thought maybe it was going to give more votes to people that they don't want elected. They're smart people. They wouldn't do that. Oh, plus I should point out that we know for sure what that number is because Facebook actually did an experiment, and they published the experiment in 2012, where they sent out a "Go Vote" reminder on Election Day in 2010, and they actually measured how many more people got off their sofas and went and voted. So they sent it to 60 million people. That caused an additional 340,000 more people to go vote. So the numbers...
Did they see the breakdown of Republican, Democrat? Did it have that?
They didn't report that, but of course...
They would have had it.
They would have known, sure.
Yeah. The problem that we're entering here is, and we're going to do a podcast together, and I want to talk to you about the meaning of free will, because we're being manipulated in such a way, and especially just over the horizon, where you think you're making the choice, but you're really not making the choice. You've been led to that choice, which becomes extraordinarily dangerous. And it's coming from these corporations that are above the Constitution. The Bill of Rights, that relates to the government, not to corporations. And conservatives have always been fine with the private sector. But I think, I'd love to hear somebody else's opinion, perhaps yours. I think the founders, we have finally come to a place where the founders did not see something like this coming. A force much more powerful than the government, one that could eat the government. People are talking about regulation. You're for regulation. Are you not?
Sort of. The problem with regulating tech is that tech moves so fast
Can't keep up.
that law and regulation cannot keep up. So, yeah, I have some ideas for regulation, but I think we need other approaches.
Okay, because my concern on regulation is what happened in the 1930s with the big three automakers and everybody else. The people who write that are going to be Google and Facebook. You know, anytime anybody says, "Oh, please regulate me," why? It will become onerous on the people that could challenge them, and they keep their competition at bay, as history has shown us. So what else could be done?
Well, the most important thing is when you understand the nature of the problem and how big this problem is, because it goes beyond conservatives. It goes beyond the United States. I mean, these companies are impacting the thinking and behavior and votes of more than 2.5 billion people around the world every single day. When you realize the power that they have, the main thing you conclude is we've got to do something.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, there's some possible laws that could be passed, some possible regulations that would be helpful. But we need to think out of the box on this because we've never faced a problem like this before.
So what is out of the box?
Well, for me, it's been developing monitoring systems, developing ways of looking over users' shoulders with their permission, and seeing what these companies are sending to these people.
Because if I'm sitting next to you and I'm a Democrat, you're a Republican, I might get something different than you get in my search results.
Exactly right. That's the key.
And then it's gone. Once I click off that screen, that's gone, and
That's
there's
right.
no record.
It's called an ephemeral experience, and that phrase comes from a leak last year of Google documents to the Wall Street Journal, and they were saying, how can we use ephemeral experiences to change people's views about Trump's immigration policy?
This is crazy that this is out there, and yet you're trashed as you're a crazy kook by people you've supported your whole life.
Well, that's what's happened to me lately, and my head is still spinning from it. But I'm not going to stop studying what I'm studying, and I'm not going to stop, trying to warn people about, these problems.
So you have to put together, what exactly does this system look like?
Well, in 2016, I recruited around the country 95 voters, a very diverse group of 95 American voters in 24 states, installed custom software on their computers that allowed my team to look over their shoulders when they were doing election-related searches online, and then we were aggregating that in real time, aggregating that information, a lot of information. So we preserved more than 13,000 election-related searches on Google, Bing, and Yahoo, and about 98,000 web pages to which the search results linked, and then we were able to then analyze the data looking for bias, that type of thing. 2018, I set up a somewhat bigger system, preserving more than 47,000 searches and about 400,000 web pages. 2020, we have to go to much greater lengths. We've got to be looking over the shoulders of probably thousands of people in all 50 states, and we've got to be looking not just for search results, but bias in news feeds, for example, email suppression, shadow banning, search suggestions, those little suggestions that flash at you, when you're starting to type a search term.
I'm on YouTube. I'm Glenn Beck. Glenn Beck never comes up in my YouTube feed. Never. And I search for Glenn Beck stuff, I'll watch this interview back or something. It doesn't come up as a suggestion. How's that possible in my feed?
Well, that's called throttling, and again, we now know how to preserve information like that and to analyze it fast, analyze it very fast. How about a go vote prompt that's sent to people of just one party? Well, with monitoring systems in place, we'll detect it. We'll detect it within hours.
So how much is this going to cost?
This is going to cost a lot of money to monitor that many things and develop the AI that's needed to analyze the data.
Do you have time?
Well, this is, I mean, if I can find the funds, this is all I will do for a period actually of roughly 18 months. That's all I'll do.
How much money do you need to get really rolling?
This is going to cost more than $50 million.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, there's a lot of tech involved here, but I also see this though as a kind of turning point to try to rescue society or protect society, not just in the U.S. but worldwide, to protect society from the shenanigans that new technologies, might have to threaten us. Because once we have a large-scale system in place, we're going to find out, how to make such systems permanent and how to duplicate them around the world.
You used the word shenanigans, but we were sitting in my office before we went on, and I said, "This is scary stuff," and you said to me, "Well, it wasn't when I started, and it's getting scarier every day, and next year, 2020, all hell is going to break loose." We have about a minute and a half. What do you mean by that?
Well, in 2020, people are just going to have no idea what's true and what's not. Pictures, audio recordings, deep fakes of videos, fake news, you name it. We are going to be bombarded with that kind of content. We're not going to know what's going on. And also, even the stuff we see is not even the real threat. It's the censorship of material, meaning you don't see it. You're not going to know what you're not seeing. You don't know what you don't know.
I can't wait for the podcast. We'll tell you when this podcast is up. We're going to be recording it soon, and then you'll have that full podcast. Please, on the bottom of the screen, you will see a place where you can donate, get involved. Please spread this to all of your friends. Tell them we need some big pockets to step up and help. We are posting this on Google's YouTube, and I can guarantee you it's not going to be an option to be shared, but please share it with your friends, and please go to mygoogleresearch.com for more, mygoogleresearch.com.